So the first step to changing your tire is figuring out the equipment you need. So to lift up the car, you're going to need something like a floor jack or a car included jack. The floor jack is more stable and can carry more weight, but the car included jack normally is better if you're in a pinch because it's lighter and it fits exactly where it should be jacked up from in the car. The next step is removing the lug nuts or lug bolts, and this is a more universal way of removing them because it has 4 different sizes that are popular, and the one behind that is the style I prefer because it's bolt specific and it's a lot stronger and it's a lot easier to put pressure on it. And the final thing you'll need is a jack stand, and this is in the event that either this or the car included jack fails. It's going to make sure that your car doesn't slam on the ground or it doesn't crush you. So now actually on jacking up the car, here's what you do. If you're at home, Again, if you're at home, it is highly recommended that you use a floor jack just because it's a lot more stable, and I've definitely seen a couple cars fall just because they weren't using the right jack. So jack it up, make sure that this handle right here, see, it turns left, which loosens the pressure in it and lowers the car back down. And if you turn it all the way to the right, that's when it finally starts building up pressure. So when you jack up the car, you need to make sure that the pressure is fully tight, because when you're working on the car, it can lose pressure over time and that leads to it falling on the ground. So continue jacking it up until the tire looks like it's gonna come off the ground. So as you can see right here. So at that point, it's best to get your tool that you're gonna loosen the lug nuts or lug bolts. So at this point, with the car jacked up, the next step is to grab the tool that you're gonna be removing the lug nuts or lug bolts with. So this is a breaker bar with an extension and a 17mm socket. And the socket is the main thing you change from car to car. This one is a 17mm socket, which is also thin-walled. So to put that into better explaining, the size of the bolt in here is 17mm distance, and thin-walled means that this wall on the outside is thinner. So the reason why you can't get a thick-walled socket is because occasionally it will hit the, so if you look right here, it will hit where the hole ends and it could mar the finish on the wheels, or sometimes it just won't fit at all. And so after you have your tool, it's important to know kind of the difference between the tools. So the reason why you wouldn't want to use something like this is because it's just too short, and although it has the right size socket and the right size wall, you just cannot put enough pressure on something this small. And so I'll get a better look at the wheel. When you put something like the breaker bar on it, you have to be very careful you don't mess up the finish on the wheel, and you just kind of feel for it to slide in, and then you turn it left, which is left loose, right tight. So definitely take some pressure to get the lug bolt or lug nut cracked, but after that it just comes off with a spin. And comparing that to the smaller tool, let's see, it's set to off. No matter what you do, I don't think it's coming off at all. Yeah, definitely not coming off. The reason why you want to loosen up the lug nuts or lug bolts before the wheel's in the air is because once the wheel's in the air, it free spins. So to put that into demonstration, we get the wheel actually in the air. And at this point, you could see any pressure you put on it, the tire, it's just gonna spin. So it's possible that you could do it that way, but just for simplicity, definitely would recommend making sure that the tire has pressure from the ground to start doing that. So after your lug nuts are loose, really all you need to do is just spin with, normally I like to use the extension and the socket, but if you have a long enough socket, you can just use the socket itself. But so loosening them all up, pretty simple. You know, you just spin left. Spinning left is just to loosen, and then to get them put it back on, you spin right. So you need to make sure before taking off the final lug nut or lug bolt that wherever the wheel is right now, if it does slide off of the wheel hub, that, you know, it won't be getting in the way of anything. And just prepare for when you finish loosening up the final wheel, that any sort of movement could kind of knock it off the hub, which you want to be prepared for. So, you know, loosening it up, you know, really nothing's going to happen. You know, put off by hand. Oh, still a little bit on there. So now that that's off, I'm gonna move the camera a little bit back, and you can see that sometimes it takes a little bit of pressure to get off the hub, but on this one it doesn't. So for your tire, normally, as long as you don't have a stretched tire, you can kind of just place it with the face to the sky and the back of the wheel kind of just laying on the ground. Or if you're at home like I am, it's easier just to lay the tire against a wall. So now that the tire's off, you know, that's kind of the whole point of the video, so I'll be showing you how to put it back on. But if you're unsure about your brakes, it doesn't hurt to check the brakes here, and we'll be getting into that, I think, in another video. But in case I'm not, generally what you want to do is, so this is called the caliper, and there's an opening in the caliper normally. Sometimes you can see it from the top if it's a bigger wheel, but since my car is lowered, it's kind of hard to check. So you just want to look at the pads, the brake pads, and make sure that there's enough space on the brake pads to ensure that you want to keep running them. Sometimes, or actually over time, your brake pads will wear down, and the way that you can make sure that they're still fine is you'll see kind of the outside of the pad and the inside of the pad, and those will be gripping on this part, the brake rotor, and you can see a kind of grayish metal that, you know, if it's low, it's kind of just gonna look like nothing because there won't be much there. But if there is a lot there, then it will just be like a thick gray, kind of looks like the same color as pencil lead, and it will look probably I don't know a good representation for how thick it would be, but probably a good size pad is like generally the size of a fingernail or half of a fingernail. Anything below that, it kind of starts getting risky. And by fingernail, I mean like this kind of size. I don't mean like if you're looking at it like that, that's way too thin. You need to replace it. So the next step from here, after investigating what you want to do, is just to put the tire back on. So the main part about getting started with putting the tire back on is to, you need to get the hub of the wheel onto the hub of the car. And generally you know, if you're new to doing it, it can be a hard task, but while putting it on, you also need to make sure that the holes on the wheel align with the holes on the rim. So the hard part about it is on some cars, when you move the hub, the the interior holes will move too, so you want to make sure that you're getting it pre-aligned and pre-adjusted so you don't have to take it off and spin the inside of the hub to realign up the holes. So getting the tire back on, you can grip the tire or the wheel depending on the spoke, but you know, if you don't want to mess up the finish, I would definitely recommend grabbing onto the tire instead. So looking at the bolt pattern, I can see that I need to have it slightly tilted to the right with the square. So now that I've got that lined up, just want to put it on the hub. Sometimes you can put your foot underneath the wheel to kind of prop it up, like how I'm doing. Then you want to get your bolt and get it in there. Make sure that you don't drop it at this point, because if you do, your finger will be smashed, and it does definitely not feel nice. So now you can see this is on here, and I'll get my extension. And from now on, the wheel is pretty much tight on there, so you know, if you kick it, it won't really come off, but you know, why would you want to do that? So normally I like to put them back on in a star pattern, and generally taking them off, I probably should have said this earlier, but normally you do want to take them off in a star pattern because that's usually the way that they're tightened. So definitely by putting them back on in a star pattern, it ensures that there's equal pressure on each one of the lugs compared to doing it just, I'll show you after I do this. By doing it from like here to here to here to there, it's not really equal pressure, because you're going from, you know, the one that has the least amount of support, and then this one already has this one in here, so this one is obviously going to be a little bit more stable. So by doing it in a star, you can ensure that they're going to have equal bounces. So this is just kind of getting the wheel mounted back on, but tightening it up is definitely necessary. If you just hand tighten them, you know, it'll be wobbly, it won't be on the hub all the way. So see, the first one I thought was hand tight, but after putting all the other ones back on, I noticed that, you know, it was still loose. This one took a little bit more. So now that the lug nuts or lug bolts are hand tight, the next step is to drop the jack down, and again, to do that, all you do is turn the handle to the left. It's gonna be hard just because you know, you already built up all the pressure, so you just have to, you know, use both hands and turn it as hard as you can. So now, you know, we see that the lug nuts or lug bolts are hand tight. We can use our tool that we use to take them off, the breaker bar with the extension and the 17mm socket, to tighten them back up. And you know, since before we loosen them turning left, now we tighten them going right. So as before, you do it in a star pattern. And it doesn't hurt to go back over this pattern a couple of times. I'd recommend probably 2 to 3 times at minimum. So it's definitely not going anywhere. Just have to check the rest. And always make sure when you're tightening them that the socket is fully on the bolt, because if it's not fully on the bolt, then what can happen is that it will slip off of the lug nut or lug bolt, and at that point, you know, either you can start to strip the head of the bolt, or you know, it will just, the tool will come off and you might fall on the ground, you might hit the tool against your car. Just, you always want to make sure that what you're doing is secure. So onto this final one. Yep, so I'll tie it So that's pretty much how to remove the tire. What I didn't show in this video is the jack stand, so I'll go demonstrate that right now. The reason why I didn't do it is, I don't know, I guess I was just in a rush to finish the video. So we lift up the car to the height the unit could be at to fit the jack stand under it. Okay, so then you take your jack stand and you want to make the jack stand as close to the height as possible. So you can see right there, that's probably the smallest distance I could get with this jack stand. It's not very good, but just for demonstration purposes, so I don't have to lift the car all the way up, just using a miniature one. And another important thing with the jack stand is, like the floor jack, you want to make sure that it's on a point where if your floor jack does fall and the car falls on top of that jack, that it's not going to be messing up your car, or it's not kind of like a unstable position. So you want to make sure that, you know, if the car were to land on it, that the jack stand isn't going to tip over, or the car won't slip off of it. Like if it was on a rounded surface, it could easily just kind of push it off. So, you know, having a stable surface like that is necessary. And just to demonstrate lowering the car down, so say that, you know, that jack was all the way up to the level of the car, what would you do? You would bring the jack up just a little bit more to the point where the face of the jack stand is not going to touch any of the car, you know. And at this point, you know, you can just pull it out, and, you know, with nothing underneath the car, you know, make sure there's no tools, no, you know, no pets, anything like that. You just do that, and it just falls. And I guess it's not too uncommon that your car makes a squeaky noise like that. But, you know, definitely, if it does make a squeaky noise like that, you should at least kind of know what it is. I know that right now, I currently have my old wheels and tires on, and I know that part of the tire is just very slightly hitting part of my suspension, because I have a different suspension than what the stock one is. So it's just very slightly rubbing on that, which makes that squeaky sound. But, you know, if your car is fully stock and it's making that squeaky noise, it could be that you have a bad bushing, or a you know, something that needs to be lubricated, or part of the tire might be rubbing on part of the body of the car. There's a lot of different things it really could be. So if it does make a squeaky noise like that, most of the time you're gonna be fine, but just to be safe, it doesn't hurt to get that checked out.